It's all over, Lady Liberty's gone. Holy rollers with Jesus on the lawn. Bible thumpers, you've got the doom poured on. 'Cause it's all over when the evening news is on. Empty always, in the dark always, frighten me. Golden silhouettes burning through TV screens. Loving your loneliness, taking your time, sweet time. Oh, I don't know, but it's paranoia with murder on the rise. Hang on to your hats, because we're in for a bumpy ride. I said that something wicked this way comes tonight. Empty always, in the dark always, finding me. Golden silhouettes burning through TV screens. Loving your loneliness, taking your time, sweet time. Oh, I don't know, but it's paranoia and murder's on the rise. It's all over, Lady Liberty's gone.
All right, guys. Well, welcome. Let me get us ready. Hello. Welcome, Jennifer and everybody to Environmental Coffee House. I am Sandy Shellis, and welcome to Jennifer Hines and Jim Massa. I am so happy to be able to host this venue because these are two of my favorite people in the whole world, and it is at least on Sunday night. But for God's sakes, we're here together. Welcome, everyone. Tonight, we have another video that we're going to play that is actually really critical to the discussion. So basically, it's a vignette that's going to really lay out the line, and then I can still stand up. So, Jen, why don't you then go through what the main premise is, and then Jim, you can talk about what you would like to talk about with the science that you and Jen are going to talk about, and we'll get going with the video.
Yeah, well, good day, good eve. Good to see you, Jim. Good to see you, Sandy. Hello, all.
Yeah.
The show today is called Truth or Lies.
Yeah.
And this is a more serious show. So, like last time we were on, we had Santa. And, you know, sometimes we're light and sometimes we're silly. But I think we're living in a very profound moment. So when I was talking with Sandy, I told her I'd want to call the show Truth or Lies, because it really, you know, what you believe is what you're going to fight for, as we've seen. And, you know, how momentous is it on Tuesday in politics here in the United States? Georgia won the Senate. Both senators, Dem Senate people, won in Georgia. effectively, yay, effectively, I mean, it's a miracle, effectively giving control of the House, the Senate, and the presidency to the Democrats. So at least everybody's going to be in sync and it's not going to be endless fighting, I hope. On Wednesday, the Capitol building was attacked by a violent mob. And the people who were fighting, there were something like 40 to 60,000 people at Trump's speech a little bit up the mall before he said, let's go down and take back this country. And they were all pumped up on this kind of crazy thing that he puts out. And they believed what he said. So that's a lie. But when we believe lies, we kind of can put our actions in the wrong place, right? Then at the same time, we've got the coronavirus and it's out of control. We're currently almost up to 5,000 deaths a day here in the United States. This is a direct reflection of the authoritarian rule that we found ourselves in. And number three, kind of backseat to this whole thing, is climate change and all the things that are going on there. Now, Michael Mann has just written a new book, and it's out on January 12th, and it's called The New Climate War, The Fight to Take Back Our Planet. And we're going to be diving into that and all sorts of aspects of it, as I'm sure that many of you are aware. And we're going to cover a couple of stories about the first ones from Inside Climate News. Many scientists now say that global warming could stop relatively quickly after emissions go to zero. So this is like the new math. And we're going to be talking about this quote, new math, and whether it's got it, if it's a manipulation or not. I mean, we're going to try and dive into it as fearlessly as possible. And the next article we're going to cover is from the Columbia Journalism Review, 60 Minutes, The Guardian, and Game-Changing New Climate Science. So here again, the new math. And basically what this new math is, well, I won't spoil it, but it's gripping. Then the next article we're going to cover is from Berkeley, berkeley.edu, the university in California. Michael Mann fought climate denial. Now he's fighting climate doom. The climatologist is taking on both the fossil fuel lobby and those who think the climate fight is futile. So we're going to get into a concept called doom porn and what is doom porn and, you know, all sorts of things like that. And this is kind of where he's coming from. And that's pretty much all I had lined up. But I know that Jim has some kind of like different things that he wants to go over. I think he's got some graphics, some graphs. I'm not sure. I haven't seen them. But one thing that we are going to cover is something from Arctic Today. This is science. And where did I put it? It had to do with the pingos. Anyway, there's a record number of pingos. I'm going to have to go get it again. But they're basically going to be graphing out the pingos, and there are twice as many pingos. If you don't know what those are the methane volcanoes that explode in the Arctic, twice as many as they thought they had. So Sandy and Jim, that's our lineup where we're going today. Sandy, you're on mute.
Welcome from frosty Alaska.
Howdy.
Hi. Well, I was happy you sent me some good graphics, so I know you and Jennifer are going to do the science discussion of this whole thing. And but feel free to pipe up when there is something that you feel about the discussion as far as the political aspect, the solutions discussions and all, because there's probably going to be a lot. So I'm going to then put on this video, guys. You really have to watch it, and it's a vignette of things I put together because it's critical to the discussion. And yes, I know I was muted and blah, blah, blah. There's always going to be that one little thing, as serious as the show is. So guys, here we go, and watch and learn.
Climate change. The impacts of climate change are no longer subtle.
Your new book, which will be out in a few weeks, The New Climate War, it talks about how essentially there's a whole new set of strategies that the fossil fuel billionaires and the fossil fuel corporations are bringing to the table, if I understand that correctly. You want to lay that out for us?
Yeah, absolutely, Tom. So, as I was saying before, the impacts of climate change are now so obvious to the person on the street that it just isn't credible to deny that something's happening. So the forces of inaction, or the inactivists, as I like to call them, and I call them in the book, have turned to a whole new set of tactics in their effort to prevent this necessary transition from fossil fuels, to block efforts to transition towards renewable energy. And, it includes a whole array of really somewhat nefarious tactics, such as trying to foment division within the climate advocacy community, online, using trolls and bots to get climate activists fighting with each other over their vision of how we attack this problem, getting them fighting with each other so that climate advocates don't speak with a coherent, unified voice. And one of the ways they do that, by the way, is by getting people to argue about personal behavior, individual behavior, your carbon purity, do you eat meat? Do you fly? Have you had children? And if they can get us, again, arguing with each other, then we're not speaking coherently with a unified voice demanding action of our policymakers. But the other reason for getting us to debate, our travel and food choices and our individual behavioral choices, lifestyle choices, exactly, is because they want to deflect attention away from the needed systemic solutions, policies, right, legislation, actions by our executive to incentivize renewable energy, to put a price on carbon so that polluters have to pay for their pollution. They don't want to see those systemic solutions because that's really what's going to ultimately accelerate the transition from fossil fuels. So they've deflected attention instead to individual behavior. Also, fomenting doom and gloom, despair mongering. There is an increasing sector, increasingly large sector within the community of climate advocates, of individuals who have become convinced that it's too late to do anything, and they've fallen into despair and
this is
doom
the Guy
mongering.
McPherson crowd you're talking about? Yeah,
well,
let's just go into hospice.
Yeah, there's 10 years left and all life on Earth will be extinct and there's nothing we can do about it, which is an argument actually made by Guy McPherson. So he's an excellent example of that phenomenon. And if you really believe that there's nothing that you can do about the problem, then it leads you down that same path of inaction as outright denial, right? And the forces of inaction, fossil fuel interests and those promoting them, they don't care about the path you take. They just care about the destination. They want you to end up in a position of inaction, of hopelessness, despair, or just disinterest. And so we have to recognize these tactics. We have to recognize the false solutions. That's another one of the fronts in this new climate war, promoting so-called solutions that aren't real solutions. Planting trees, well, that can help at the margins, but it's not fundamentally going to address the problem at its core. Or techno fixes, right? Shooting stuff into the stratosphere to block out sunlight to try to cool the planet back down, or dumping iron into the ocean to fertilize algae. What could possibly go wrong when we start tampering in an uncontrolled way at a massive planetary scale? So these are all efforts to divert attention and to divert us from taking the necessary steps, policy-wise, of solving this problem systemically. And so we need to recognize that those are the tactics that are being used, and to not become, unwitting victims, unwitting agents, really, in this new climate war. When we fight with each other online over our purity, lifestyle purity, we're playing into their tactics. When we exclaim that it's too late to do anything, that we're effed and there's nothing we can do about it, again, they win. The polluters win because fingers at each other in fighting, so they divide us. It's divide and conquer. They distract attention from the need for systemic solutions by focusing on individual behavior as if that's the ultimate solution to the problem. And they discredit some of the most important messengers of limiting carbon pollution below levels that will lock in truly catastrophic climate change. We've got a lot of work left to do, and that means the Biden administration can not only undo the damage that was done, but really now has to lead and has to move forward. And there's, an indication that they're doing that. But the fact that we're providing subsidies to the fossil fuel industry, to energy interests that are basically destroying the planet, and not providing similar incentives for renewable energy is just crazy, right? It's perverse. It's a perverse incentive structure. We need to level the playing field, and that's part of why we need to provide subsidies to renewable energy industry. We need to put a price on carbon. I think that's an important tool in the toolbox. Some progressives recently have sort of started to back off in their support for carbon pricing. I think it's one of a number of important tools. We basically have to use every tool that's available to us, and carbon pricing is part of it.
So if the models are so much better now, what do they say about the next 10, 20, 30 years?
So there's a little bit of good news. In the old days, we would sort of use the models to study human-caused climate change by treating carbon dioxide levels as if they're a knob. You just turn up the carbon dioxide knob and you see how the climate responds. But that's not how the real world works. In the real world, it isn't a knob. We put carbon into the atmosphere. The oceans can take up some of that carbon. The plants can take up some of that carbon. So a more realistic, more comprehensive model includes the so-called carbon cycle. We allow those components of the climate system to interact. And when they do that, here's the bit of good news. What they tell us is how much warming we're committed to now is mostly a function of how much carbon we've burned up to now. Now, in the older experiments, the model suggested that even if we stopped burning carbon now, because of just the thermal inertia of the oceans, they can absorb so much heat, they would continue to warm up for decades. That's bad. Because of the more sophisticated experiments we can do, we can see now that no, if you stop burning carbon right now, the ocean increases the amount that it's taking out of the atmosphere. The vegetation increases the amount that it's taking out of the atmosphere. And so temperatures remain pretty much flat. We are only committed to the warming that has happened already. If we stop burning carbon now, we stop the warming of the planet. In a sense, that is empowering. It tells us we can have a real impact.
So you're saying this is reversible?
So reversible is an even bolder proposition. And it is reversible, but then we're talking about, can we bring the thermostat back down? Not just keep temperatures where they are, but actually bring it down. The models tell us we can do that, but to do that, we have to not only stop burning fossil fuels, we actually have to suck some of that carbon dioxide back out of the atmosphere. And 20, 30 years from now, we might be able to do that. We have never failed as a society to come up with ingenious technical achievements down the road. We can't do that now. In decades from now, we might be able to do that. So the critical thing now is to stop turning the thermostat up. We can do that. And with the right technology and deploying that technology, then we can actually bring the thermostat down. But we've got to stop warming first. We've got to do what we can now and not rely on technology that's currently unproven and we can't rely on to get us where we need to go.
Well, it was very important that we listen to that vignette so that we could go on with this conversation. And I just have a short little bit of commentary for me, and then I'm going to hand it over to Jim and Jen. I'll play devil's advocate somewhat, that he is corporate America. He is probably talking to the Biden administration. They have a climate plan. When he says, and we're going to get to this when we go to the Rolling Stone article, when he says, he talks about that there are those of us out here that say, well, capitalism has to go. And he's saying, oh, no, it doesn't. This is his wheelhouse, his genre, okay? But there are so many people out there. He's doing what he's doing, but there are a lot of others that are working for economic change, that are working for all those things. Those are the activists. I don't know that many people of inaction. And that's all I'm going to say. I don't know. I mean, Extinction Rebellion is a big example of action, okay? And but he is the corporate scientist. So of course he's going to say these things because carbon credits and all that. And I've looked at it and I'm thinking, well, within the parameters of where we are, it makes sense. My own personal opinion is not here. This is just what I'm interpreting him. And as I said, I'm handing it over to you guys because Jennifer and I could see both of you are like thinking, yeah, I gotta talk.
Well, it's a little bit frustrating listening to him. I would bet that pretty much everybody who watches this show is at least a part-time climate nerd and eats this stuff for breakfast. It's way too fascinating. Once you dig into this stuff, it's way too fascinating. So it's not like he's talking to neophytes. When we watch this, I kind of watch it with askance. But, he's contending with some things. Now, some things that I have a problem with. And I'm going to read you this quote, and this is a quote from InsideClimateNews.org. I'm just going to jump to the pith of it, right? So here's the new math, guys, and you'll be real happy to know that we've got new math, and there's a lot less to worry about. Just the chase there, right? Best understanding that if we bring down CO2 to net zero, how are you going to do that? The warming will level off. The climate will stabilize within a decade or two. This is Michael Mann talking. There will be very little to no additional warming. Our best estimate is zero. The widespread idea that decades or even centuries of additional warming are already baked into the system, as suggested by previous IPCC reports. The IPCC is already way conservative, right? Were based on an unfortunate misunderstanding of experiments done with climate models that never assumed zero emissions. Well, how are you going to get to zero emissions with 8 billion people on this earth, all who want to live a life like we live here in the United States, and I don't blame them. Those models assumed that concentrations of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere would remain constant and that it would take centuries before they decline, said Penn State climate scientist Michael Mann, who discussed the shifting consensus last October during a segment on 60 Minutes. The idea that global warming could stop relatively quickly after emissions go to zero was described as game-changing new scientific understanding by Covering Climate Now, a collaborative of news organizations covering climate. This is really true, he said. It's a dramatic change in the paradigm that has been lost on many who covered this issue, perhaps because it hasn't been well explained by the scientific community. It's an important development that's still underappreciated. It's definitely the scientific consensus now that warming stabilizes quickly within 10 years of emissions going to zero. Wow.
And
How
that's
do we
all
unwrap
because of
these
new
concepts?
models? Yeah.
I really am not sure. I'm sure it's all in his book, which I have actually pre-ordered his book. I don't agree with everything Michael Mann says, that's for sure. And he makes me uncomfortable somehow on a personal level that I can't quite explain. But, this is what he's saying. And part of me really, I do wish that was true, but I'd like to talk with Jim about this new math. And Jim, I think you read a couple of these articles that we sent over your way. So you can kind of see where I'm coming from. What do you think of this new math, Jim?
Well, I haven't seen any of these papers. So I'm not seeing anything in the literature of this new assessment or consensus. So I'm not sure where this is coming from, to be quite honest. The papers I'm seeing, there's been some papers that have examined possible scenarios unfolding for going to zero emissions, and the results of the models are all over the place. And they basically state that these models need a lot of work. So I'm extremely dubious, to be blunt about it.
Yeah.
I'm
extremely dubious too. It just doesn't seem like it's possible. Plus, the whole concept of self-reinforcing runaway feedbacks. Let's talk about the Arctic. Let's talk about the fact that the sea ice is almost gone. Let's talk about the fact that the oceans are acidifying before our eyes faster and faster and faster. Let's talk about ocean warmth. Let's talk about ocean stratification and what happens when all this really starts to mix in. Let's talk about all the ecosystem breakdown. Let's talk about the runaway population. You can see my frustration with this thing, right? I'm sure you feel something along the same way.
Of course. And the thing is, they mentioned in that article it's going to zero. First of all, getting to zero emissions, please share whatever foliage you are smoking, because it's just not going to happen. Realistically, even
runaway fairy tale. I don't know. It's just like share some of that with me, because I would love to believe that. I don't like. Am I a doom porn person? Is that true? Are we doom porn people because we pay attention to truth, because we're very interested in it? Does that make us porners?
No, and I'm not
really?
I am not being painted by any brush. That's why Environmental Coffee House, we bring everything under the environmental umbrella. I'm not being painted, you're not being painted, and nobody's painted. Because you know what? Labels suck. And I'm sorry, but that is also divisive. And so there's no labels here. you know, we can joke around and say, oh, doomers, doomosphere, doomer chicks. But actually, what we are is educated. And it's not a
Right.
joke.
Well, let me put
We're
it to you this way.
educated and we educate others as well. Yeah,
Yeah.
Let me put it to you this way. The article talks about leveling off at 2C. Even if you level off at 2C, you're still going to have all these positive feedback loops that have been kickstarted. They're still going to keep occurring. You can go to zero emissions. You could, but you're still going to have methane coming out of the permafrost. The oceans are warming. And they're warming. You get to the point they can no longer absorb CO2, and then they're going to start outgassing the CO2 that's in the oceans back into the atmosphere. I'm sorry, but to discount this, coming from someone like Michael Mann, who I actually, respect in ways, is kind of dismaying to me. Because let's be blunt, you cannot argue with physics.
Well, he's trying
And the
to.
physics are clearly telling us that this stuff is happening and it's going to keep on happening.
And the warming of the ocean, it just doesn't stop overnight. And the acidification of the ocean, it's increasing. And all of that CO2 that's lodged in the atmosphere, if it washes into the ocean, that creates greater and greater acidification. That's the breakdown of our biggest eco space on Earth.
And
we're 75% ocean.
And don't forget, when you have the thermohaline circulations flowing, you are sequestering the heat and the carbon to depths. You're taking it out of the surface water. You start stratifying the ocean layer, you're going to shut down thermohaline flow. You're going to keep all the heat and carbon in the upper layers so that you exacerbate a situation. And you're right, you have specific heat of water. It's not going to just suddenly cool down. And you just have all this latent heat energy that's going to be introduced back into the atmosphere as you continue to warm the oceans. And let's not forget, if you have a permanent stratification situation, which is very likely, phytoplanktons are going to die off because they're going to use up their nutrients. And if phytoplanktons die off, phytoplanktons provide some 55 to 80% of our atmospheric oxygen. And by the way, atmospheric scientists have already measured a decrease in atmospheric oxygen.
Jen?
That is absolutely true. If you look at a cyclical annual oxygen map on Earth, year over year over year, the oxygen level on Earth is going down and down and down. And every single year we have less oxygen on this planet and more carbon dioxide on this planet and all the other greenhouse gases than we had the year before. And what fiction is this man in? I wish he was right, but my gut tells me he's wrong. It just feels wrong.
It's not your gut, it's the data. It's the data. You don't have to say your gut is, you just say the data indicates that this is what's going on. So, and don't forget, another reason why the oxygen levels are declining, you have massive fires burning across the planet. What fuels fires? Oxygen.
Yeah, that's true. And the fires every year are worse than the year before, lest we forget. Runaway fires in the Amazon, runaway fires in Australia, runaway fires all over the Western United States, runaway fires in Siberia, and probably loads of other places as well. I mean, these fires are sucking up the oxygen, putting huge amount of particulation into the atmosphere. And if any of this air, which it goes all over the place, right, doesn't just stay over here, gets up into the Arctic, that completely goes onto the ice pack, decreases the albedo, sets up a cycle of speeded up warming. I mean, before long, Greenland is a freaking sponge of Swiss cheese, right? It's got like moulins, it's got lakes inside
Yep.
of it, it's got softening ice, it's got things that are sliding around. That could very well just like go into the sea, and at some point, and chunks of it do. Antarctica. Let's talk about Antarctica. When the CO2 levels emissions of humans suddenly go to quote zero, is Antarctica, which has taken such a large push to get into the melting that it needed, and now it's runaway melting. It's, all sorts of glaciers breaking off, and sea ice breaking off. It's amazing. So I just think, is it a truth or is it a lie? Personally, I think it's a lie. I think it just strikes me as it's impossible what he's saying. He doesn't take into account the complexity of the Earth system, not to mention the runaway population and the decreasing goodness of the soils and the lack of productivity in the soils and the food going down, down, down. Maybe he's an agent that's been put out there to calm the masses with this.
Well, yeah, I was going to
Because
say.
what he is, maybe that's what it is, because it doesn't match up to anything that I know.
He's the CNN climate change guy. He's the let's calm the masses, let's not stop consumerism. I think his heart for him is in the right place. I don't think he's paid by the fossil fuel industry. In fact, I mean, he rails against the subsidies. He says the subsidies are insanity to give to the fossil fuels industry. So I just, again, it's as simple as the man is he's the today now corporate guy, and we have a lot of different voices out there in this genre, but we don't fight. I mean, go.
If I can throw out this thing to think about, here's one good reason why getting to zero emissions will never happen. The medical industry. Do you know that the medical profession is one of the biggest users of plastic products? Whether it's the IV bag, the tubing from the IV bag, to the plastic valve that controls the flow of whatever's in the bag, the medical profession uses a lot of plastic. And so if you have zero, and plastic, of course, is a petroleum product. So if you go to zero emissions, then you're going to have to replace all those equipment that is the medical profession uses that's based on plastic. So that means you're probably going to have to go back to glass jars, glass bottles for your IV solutions, for example. And then maybe a rubber tubing, which isn't as sterile. And so then, okay, so now you've used up this glass bottle. So now you have to what? You have to sterilize it. Sterilizing it requires use of energy. So just on the medical profession is a huge user of petroleum product. So just on the basis of that alone makes the notion of getting to zero emissions seriously a pipe dream. I just don't see it happening.
Seriously.
A lot of us don't. However, people that Michael Mann is talking to, they don't understand, and they never will, because they're going to be propagandized and kept from the truth. Panic isn't a good look, I guess. And although they called him an alarmist, all the climate deniers, Jennifer, all those articles you sent me, and it was, on all the climate denying sites, and those are the people that used to go after Michael Mann, and he was threatened, and he's equating he's equating, I would imagine, us with the fossil fuel industry. I'm sorry, it's so far-fetched. But I do agree, subsidies are.
He said this thing about like how we're not getting along and how we're fighting and stuff like that. Well, I know for a fact when Torsten Vidal and I did a a series called Permafrost Wars. I think this was like 2 or 3 years ago, maybe 3 years ago. I'm not entirely sure. But it started with this thing from the Yale Climate Forum, that emotional girl who was saying, oh, no, methane, and she was like all upset about
We
the
went over that.
methane monster and stuff like that. And so Torsten and I did kind of a stand-up call-out show on, the bullshit of all this. And then Michael Mann got into the picture, and he made his own video denouncing these, doomer people who had the wrong end of the stick and were out scaring everybody. And
Yeah,
so that's
same
basically
thing.
how he's trying to paint us, is these very scary doomer people who have the wrong end of the stick, don't know their science, and are just out to scare everybody and are into doomer porn. So guys, that's your identity, right?
No,
It's a
I
lie.
think. I'm sorry. I didn't mean
Go
to
ahead,
interrupt.
please. I'm done. No, it's great.
I think that's part of the pushback that Natalia and Igor are experiencing, because everyone keeps slamming their work, saying they're overestimating, and they're blowing the whole methane issue out of proportion. When if anything, even and Igor's admitted this to me himself, he basically said, even our estimates are probably underestimates themselves, because the ocean is a big place and it's very difficult to sample. Siberia is a big place, difficult to sample, but they're able to conduct more research, more sampling per year than other researchers who go up there for a 2-week cruise in July, and that's it. And they do a little transect. They get some samples, they make some measurements, and they say, well, this is what we have. Those two over there are overblowing things. When Igor and Natalia are constantly sampling, constantly measuring, and they're basically saying, yeah, we have a problem here. So I think it falls into that same mindset as to why those two have been really poorly treated, I hate to say.
Very poorly treated. And I understand why Michael Mann might feel that he's picked on, because when he makes these, and now he kind of, externalizes that with, well, why can't we just all get along? Kumbaya. Yes, doomers do pick on Michael Mann. They jump onto his chat and they say probably all these things because they get so frustrated by his new math. So this is just an externalization of him feeling like he's been picked on, and he has been picked on, and he's been picked on from both sides. Probably the guy's a little bit beat up. He got beat up by all the climate deniers when he brought out the hockey stick. Now, the hockey stick did bring to light a lot of things that are now just part and parcel of our brain, but just because he's the one that brought it up doesn't mean he owns that thing forever, right? And now he feels like the doomers are picking on him, and he's saying, well, why can't we just all get along? By the way, doomers, remember, you're all into doom porn, and you've got bad science.
Yeah, and put the whole thing of putting down Jem Bendell, and there's enough room. There's enough room for all of us, and I don't think that anybody is saying, just sit back and watch fucking TV till the end. I mean, I don't see anybody I know saying that. And even if you're just a keyboard warrior, you're involved in something, and none of us, in the genre, at least I don't advocate doing nothing, and I could never do that anyway.
Yeah.
And we're here, and we give our hearts to trying to educate people, and it isn't easy.
And Sandy, excuse me, but you have formed a great community, and I love it. And it's got a lot of very informed, heart-filled, interactive, funny people who support each other. And I don't see any fighting going on here. So if he's talking about all this fighting, he's talking about something that's happening out somewhere else. Yeah, I'm sure there is.
He should come visit us, or let us interview him.
Yeah, maybe he would feel better.
I wonder if he would take a walk on the wild side. What do you think, Jim?
Breath, baby.
Well, I'm definitely going to share this. Yeah, right. I will share this on Twitter. But Kent said, does Mann still believe in the hockey stick? Oh yeah, he does. He actually does. But you know what? I'm going to pull up. Go Go ahead.
The difficulty I have with Mann is that he's too smart to hold these views, and that means that he must
That's
be
interesting.
complicit. He's too smart to, because he can hold two thoughts at the same time. I bet he can hold
Yeah.
10 thoughts at the same time and line it all up. But then he's gone down this other road, and there's other things that are behind it, and not just like his personal motivations. That's my feeling on it.
Well, and being with Penn State, it's a big Ivy League university, and they have donors. And I worked in academia, so I know that part. So does Jim, and so however by accident it might have been for him to to grow to be this public persona of climate change, because I think it was from the controversy. Who knows? The controversy was, that's where he got the voice. But there's a lot of other good voices too. And it can't just be Michael Mann all the time. But we did have the Rolling Stone article, which is a video. I didn't use it. It is a video that's going to be in the show notes. And this article, we won't go into the whole thing, but I'll show you guys because it was a compelling interview. And in this one is where he really went after the climate doom. He even said, he even went after David Wallace Wells for the uninhabitable earth. Yeah, here it is. Let me make sure it's on. The things, I gotta move this. One of the things you detail in your book is that with the old climate war, it was pretty clear to see, because now it's a new climate war, that's the name of the book, right? It was pretty clear to see how the denial movement came out of the tobacco industry, and a lot of tactics that were used by them, and then the Koch brothers and some of the think tanks. It's kind of, an organized effort. What you're talking about in this book is a little different. It seems like it's not organized in the same way as the old climate war, right? I mean, you call out a lot of lefties, from the Sierra Club to journalists like David Wallace Wells, for what you call climate doom porn. So this is a very good article. And I'll just give you a personal thing. My mother finally read, and I've told this story before, how that article was what woke them up and said, Sandy, you're right. It took David Wallace Wells to wake up a lot of people, and I don't think it's been a bad thing. God's sakes.
Yeah. But what that means is Michael Mann is much more conservative than David Wallace Wells. And a lot of us thought that David Wallace Wells was too conservative, right?
Right. A lot of us. Yeah. And he's talking about flight shaming and all this other stuff. Well, you know what? I don't know if he's feeling, I think
that these are things that he's gone through. Poor guy.
Yeah, that's what I think. That's what I think. Because, all right, we have some vegans that I personally have written to me and always get mad at me about that part of life, but that's their passion, and I understand it. It's not a doom porn thing. It just kind of, I guess it kind of hurt, because I don't particularly like that, that handle. I mean, reality. I don't even like the word porn. I think I don't like it. So I'm not using it. It is a gross term. Because porn is addictive. And they used to call, what was it when Bernie was running and everything? It was something else porn. Do you remember, Jim, in the political sphere? It's a word because I guess it connotates something, but I kind of think it's gross. And then, this is a good article from Rolling Stone. And I think everybody should go and read it because it's definitely worth a gander of reading it.
I'd like to add something.
Add it, add away.
About 10 months ago, people didn't realize it, but we embarked on an experiment. The experiment lasted about 4 weeks or so, and the experiment happened during the lockdown of COVID. Planes were grounded. A lot of people weren't driving, right? So It was measured, a noticeable drop in carbon emissions into the atmosphere. It was measured. Now, granted, it wasn't zero emissions, but it was a considerable amount of reduction in carbon emissions. Guess what temperatures did? They still continued to increase.
Yeah, they stayed increasing.
Because
it didn't change.
I'll make this point. I'll keep making this point until you get so sick of me saying this. But you have thermal inertia in the system that and with the positive feedback loops that have been more than activated, let's say, the warming is going to continue. Humans could go extinct and the warming is going to continue.
That's right, Jim. You and I had this discussion a couple of times on a couple of shows that we've done here together on Environmental Coffee House. And our little premise was, well, let's just pretend that humans stopped emitting any notable carbon dioxide and any greenhouse gas as of now. Let's say 2021, boom. That's the end. There's no more human emissions going on, so just kind of take a leap of faith. What would happen to the earth in that case if the whole thing just came to a screeching halt? And you and I both came to the conclusion that due to the damage that's already been done, the momentum that's already spinning the system, the inertia, the current carbon dioxide levels that are washing into the sea, the self-reinforcing feedbacks, the fires, the pingos, the Arctic sea ice, the methane, all of that is still baked in. It's still baked in. And I'm not trying to argue for our extinction. I'm just saying the data does not agree with this fairyland thing.
I agree. I agree. And here's something else. I got a comment from someone who watched a video I made several years, like at the beginning of my channel, and in that video, I had made the case that global warming, because of melting Greenland and putting all that fresh water into the North Atlantic, would slow down, shut down AMOC, and when that happens, the Earth tips into a cooling phase or an ice age. And I make that a statement because we have the data that indicates that. If you were to ask me the same question today, melting all the Greenland ice and putting all that fresh water into the surface of the Atlantic, will an ice age ensue? My answer now is no. Looking at the new data, okay, and seeing all the other information coming in, yes, AMOC may slow down or even stop, and AMOC is slowing down. That's been measured. The oceans are holding so much heat. In fact, the oceans are, down to 1,000 meters or so. The heat amount is something like 2 times 10 to the 23 joules of energy in the ocean, which is a crap load. Let's just put it that way. There's a scientific term for you, but it's,
well, thank you, Jim.
It's just so much energy in there that is going to eventually, latent heat energy is going to go back up into the atmosphere, and it's going to keep the atmosphere warm for millennia. But that's what the scientists do. We reassess.
Happening in the Arctic,
And I
totally agree with you. And there's just, the thing is, this is such a complex planet. I mean, this is a planet. It's an entire planet. And every system has been affected by our greenhouse gas emissions. Every single natural system on this earth, all interlinked, all interrelated. And we're not even talking about the acidity. Michael Mann didn't even mention the oceans. He didn't even mention the acidity. He didn't even mention the massive species die-off that's happening in the oceans all the time. If the oceans die, we die. It's that simple.
Yeah. And that is not hyperbole.
No.
That's not hyperbole.
Challenged about that, something I saw.
And here's something I've been discussing a lot lately. Is with the loss of sea ice, you're going to have a massive reduction in overall total productivity, primary productivity, hence secondary and tertiary, in the Arctic Ocean ecosystem, because with the sea ice there, you have the ice algae on the underside of the ice. They're doing their thing. And then when the sea ice itself melts, you got that fresh water creates a little mini stratification. You get certain phytoplanktons that like that situation, so they do their thing. And then when it finally all melts back, then you have the more marine phytos, the diatoms and so on, doing their thing. But if you lose all that sea ice, you're going to lose the productivity from the algae on the underside of the ice, as well as from the ice edge productivity. But that does not mean the marine phytos are going to take up the slack, because the angle of the sun is insufficient to activate the cytochrome system within their chloroplasts.
Okay.
So the production drops down.
It's stunning. And, guys, I know we're getting up to the top of the hour here, but I do want to cover this article about pingos.
Pingo, I'm going to pull up the pingos. And I did show some of those graphs, but we didn't get to go into it. But let's look at the pingos. I got the pingo. Pingo.
Okay, great. So, Pingos Galore digital mapping project doubles known number of iconic Arctic ice volcanoes. Though pingos look like mini volcanoes and some even have a bowl-shaped crater on top, they are the result of a completely different process. You betcha, baby. And that little mountain in the picture that you see there, that Sandy's showing, that's a pingo. I mean, they're huge and they are like little volcanoes, but they come up because there are methane hydrates, ice, methane, frozen methane, basically, that is thawing. And when methane goes from the solid state to the gaseous state, there's no in between state. It goes straight from solid ice to gas. It's an expansion. It's a huge expansion. I can't remember the exact ratio, but it's something pretty stunning, like I think 164 to 1, something unbelievable.
Wow.
So clearly when that methane hydrate melts, that ice, basically the ice encasing the methane, keeping it under pressure, goes away, it expands. And that happens when it's hot. It isn't it melts, right? It's not like very complex, but it creates a huge amount of pressure. And if the concentration in the permafrost of the methane hydrate is high, like if there's quite a deposit there and it gets hot, it's going to go boom, 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 and then it's going to blow its head off. So right now, they are finally doing a digital mapping project. It kind of makes me wonder, why didn't they do this before? But that's okay.
Funding.
There you go. There are about 1,000 more pingos, which is like they've already kind of expanded themselves, enough to vault the Northwest Territories past neighboring Alaska as the pingo capital of North America. So, hey, I was wondering, Jim, if you would like to kind of, go rhapsodic about these pingos a little bit.
Well, they're all over the Arctic, as you just stated. I can't recall if there's a video I posted or got one coming up, but I talk about a lot of these pingo issues. And if you're, quote unquote, lucky that it doesn't explode, then what happens when that ice melts, if say there's a low methane amount in there, then what happens is you get like a crater, and then that crater fills in with water and you form what's called a thermokarst lake. And you can just fly over, go past the, north of the Brooks Range in Alaska, fly over into the Yukon, whatever, and you just see all these, look, something we even have another term for, kettle bowl lakes. You just see all these circular features on the ground, and it's all filled with water, and most of them are thermokarst lakes. So this is further credence to the methane problem, that how much methane is in the ground. I saw an article recently that, and this is an extremely crude estimate, so do with this info as you will, that the estimation is about 1,400 gigatons of methane is possibly in the ground.
Wow.
Which is about
Jen.
That's unbelievable.
which is
Like,
about
this
2 to
has been
3
happening.
times.
What, Jen?
Let's be that loud.
Go ahead.
It-
Go ahead. Sorry, I was
Okay.
bad. I was interrupted.
It said the 1400
I do
gigatons
it all the
is
time.
it's about 2 to 3 times what we have already burned since the start of the Industrial Revolution.
Oh,
Now, if that all gets
And that can-
released,
And that can come into the atmosphere fairly easily. It's not like well, maybe it'll happen and maybe it won't. All it's going to take is heat. It's not very complex. The water column, if they're in the Laptev Sea or up there, it's very shallow. There's not going to be a lot absorbed into the Arctic Ocean. If it happens to be coming up on the Yamal Peninsula, it goes directly into the air. So,
Yeah.
and when they blow up, apparently, the reindeer herders say that they make this massive explosion, like it lights up the night sky, if it happens at night. So they often do have fire accompany them when they actually, do that final explosion, when that cap of whatever that biological material, soil, blows off, it just all goes into the atmosphere. That's just a manifestation. It's not like the pingos are going to do it, but this methane that's in the Arctic, that is very, very scary. And that's going to be coming out as the Arctic sea ice completely goes away, as it has pretty much through the Siberian Sea and the Laptev Sea and the Kara Sea. The
Got
sea
the
ice
graph.
is nothing like it used to be. And all that area is a ginormous deposit of methane hydrate. Ginormous.
and of course, you got the fossil fuel companies saying, "Oh, no more sea ice. Let's go in there and get the stuff. Let's get the methane. Let's get the oil and the gas." It's like, don't you idiots ever learn? No.
Do you know the newest thing is Russia wants to have a lot more tourism to Franz Josef Land. They want to bring way more cruise ships in. Are they clueless morons or what? They want to bring more cruise ships in. For fuck's sake. I'm sorry, but it's like they are just as disgusting as we are, only their people just don't have the home and garden TV life. Boy, oh boy.
Well, we see what's happening on the Siberian side of the Arctic Ocean. The East Siberian Sea, the Laptev, the Kara, the Barents, basically no ice. So yeah, I guess you can pop into your little 60-foot whatever yacht and go take a little cruise.
Well, there's definitely yachts right through the Arctic, all the way from the Fram Strait on the Greenland side, and it goes out the Alaska side.
Oh God, that's awful.
Oh yeah,
that is so
absolutely
awful.
It's happening today. It's like kind of exotic, some sort of pleasure. Are you going to get pleasure out of seeing the melting Arctic? Maybe. I don't know.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear. They kind of dropped
Who
out
would
a
get
bit.
pleasure out of that? Yeah, she was making a are we really going to get pleasure out of watching the Arctic melt? That's so pleasurable. Idiots.
So truth and lies, guys. Is it better to believe the lie if the lie makes your life less stressful? I mean, that's kind of what it comes down to,
Ignorance is bliss, right?
So I don't
Yeah, but it's not.
No, it isn't.
But-
I'm just quoting the poet, whoever said that. But
Yeah.
I don't like being ignorant.
And
Well,
also,
so we've
once
decided,
you've
none of
stripped
us.
off your blinders and you actually dig into, you have to kind of have a reckoning. You have to dig into the knowledge yourself so you understand. And you have to dig into a lot of periodicals and a lot of stuff that's happening, but it all kind of coalesces in a crisis of awakening. And once you have that crisis of awakening, you can't really put those blinders back on. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. So the only thing you're left to do, if you want to talk with people about it, join with people, with like mind, and have conversations about it. And I mean, maybe he's right in a certain way, but I don't think that it really leads us to inaction. I mean, I don't feel like I'm full of inaction, not by a long shot.
I can't help but wonder if part of this, everything be okay, is that people really don't want to acknowledge the very dire possible future that would be awaiting us, and namely the collapse of human civilization, possibly the extinction of the human species. Well, the fate of all species is extinction. We, that is a tenet of biology. You cannot escape it. But I wanted, that's part of it's like a bit of a, if you don't admit how bad it is, then you won't think it's really bad and you'll feel better. I'm not so sure that's the way to go about this.
Yeah. Well, I think that if Michael Mann said what we say, he wouldn't have the following that he has. I think that it's too raw, too unvarnished, and too non-simplistic. You have to weigh a lot of factors and understand the complexity and the momentum. That's the thing. There's so much momentum.
Yeah.
We've pushed this thing so far that, even if we stop pushing it, that ball's going to roll down the hill.
Well, there was a couple of things he said in the video that Sandy played that, to be fair, were good points. The oil subsidies is one. The geoengineering schemes is complete stupidity. And I follow very closely the iron seeding experiment. It was done several times. And all the times it was done, it was a whopping failure. Because like anything else, you have such a complex system, as you stated, that there are parameters we probably have not considered. And even of the parameters we have considered and the parameters we have not considered, we have not thought of every possible interactions between those parameters and how they might affect the response in the variable we are studying. And think back to chaos theory. What's the notion of chaos theory? Any slight changes in initial condition will result in wildly different outcome. And so if you just start messing a little bit with whatever the initial conditions are, you're going to end up with something you probably did not expect or did not anticipate, did not want. And that's the reason why, in my opinion, one of the reasons why these geoengineering schemes, but the iron seeding of the ocean did not succeed.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, once you start messing with this thing or that thing and some sort of geoengineering experiment, you don't exactly know all the different interlocking feedbacks and relationships with all the different subsystems and gases and movements
Exactly.
and environmental niches and how it's all going to work together. And in fact, we can't even identify the self-reinforcing feedbacks until we see them in action. We take note and say, oh, okay, I didn't see that before, but I can see now that this and this are interrelated and they actually relate with these and these and these. And then you can kind of map it out. But you can only map it out when it starts happening and you see it. It's an observable science.
Right.
That's an excellent point. You're absolutely correct on that. There's just so many. It's easier to run the models when you know the parameters. You're not trying to affect a different outcome. It's one thing to look at the past data that says, okay, these are the parameters. We know the interaction. We can find our, develop our equations, put it into the model, run it. Run the models until they at least 95, 99% of the time reproduce what we already know has happened before in the past. And then when we get to that level of, shall we say, competence or predictability projections with those models, then we start projecting as to, okay, if we now take the scenario out into the years to come, what will be likely to happen. That's when we make the projection. Only those models do I put more stock in because they've already verified what we've already observed. And some of the models I've seen, 3 degrees, 4 degrees C by 2100 is now considered to be an underestimation of the temperature increase. I'm seeing 5 to 7. I'm seeing 7 to 9 by 2100. That's 80 years away. And if you think about the PETM, that was what, 16 degrees C above pre-industrial revolution levels. If we're going 7 to 9 by 2100, another mere 80 years, That's halfway to the PETM levels. Humans will not survive.
Well, I have a feeling just the hardness with which we're hitting this, we're going into this sixth grade extinction much faster than the Permian mass extinction, which was the biggest extinction on Earth
That's correct.
250 million years ago. And we're going into this extinction much harder. Do you think that you can just stop it suddenly and it's just going to all be okay? Because he mentions, oh, well, as long as we stop all emissions in humanity, period, and keep the temperature to 1.5 degrees C above the pre-industrial baseline, we'll be okay, and we can do that. Hey, it just seems like some kind of crazy fairy tale to me.
Well, I go back to my sardonic comment earlier. Please share whatever foliage you are sharing, or you are smoking with us. I mean, seriously, it mean, I mean, seriously, you're smoking something. I mean, it must be good shit, but you're smoking something.
Yeah, he's smoking.
I mean, I mean, you can't argue with physics. I'm going to keep saying that point. You just can't argue with physics. Physics clearly tells us what's happening, and you're right. All the momentum, all the inertia in the system. I mean, as you said, even if we stopped it now, right now, it's still gonna glide for a while. That's why when you have a big ocean tanker coming into a harbor, they cut their engines 5 miles out.
Bingo, right like that. So anyway, I think this has been a very interesting little dive into truth and lies. I hope y'all have enjoyed it. Sandy, you want to summarize it up for us?
Sure. All right. Basically, I've enjoyed listening to you guys. I've enjoyed reading the chat. It's been an interesting conversation because, we once again took on the establishment, really. That's what we did. We took on the establishment, and that's what Dr. Mann is, an establishment climate change scientist. He understands what's going on clearly. For whatever reason, he wants to paint a brush of doom over us. It's a shame, but that's my takeaway. That is my takeaway, and more of the political takeaway. That's basically it. And I want to thank everybody for coming too. Hey, and is here. He asks from Australia. So are we going to make it? Fuck no. But that. But who knows when? And I am no procrastinator. I am prognosticator. I am a procrastinator. Prognosticator. So, Paul. Hey, Paul. Yeah, he says we'll make it. Yeah, I think there'll be pockets, of course. But, I don't, who am I? I'm just listening to you guys. So I'm saying good night to everybody.
I'm just going by with what the data tells us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
When in doubt, know the data.
Yeah, there we go. All right, guys. Well, I really appreciated this show. I loved having you guys with me. And I am going to say good night and thank you and play the end.